Welcome back. This is part 2 of a 2-part video on the Garcia 5500C3. Part 1 dealt with the left side plate, the worm drive, and the spool bearings. Today we are going to talk about the right side plate, everything inside, including the drag washers and the anti-reverse bearing. So let's go ahead and get started. I'll take the reel apart. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take the handle off. I'm going to remove the lock nut. I'm going to encourage you to place things in order as they come off the reel. We'll talk a little bit more about that as we go. 10mm wrench. Now we got the little C-clip that's going to hold the handle in. I used to use my fingernail, but I've started wearing rubber gloves, so now I'm going to use 2 flathead screwdrivers. These things will pop out on you and fly across the room, so be careful. Notice that I'm placing things as they come off in order. Before we go any further, I'm going to pull these washers out of the handle area. There's 2 washers here. Make sure you pull them out and lay them in order, and they are concaved, so they go in there a certain way. Basically what I do is I lay them out just like they came out. And the way those go back in, if you get them confused, is they're cupped and they go like this. They don't go like that, they go like this. So you put the first one in concaved up, you put the second one in concave down. The anti-reverse bearing is in here, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later, but right now I'm going to place this off to the side. So all the drag washers are underneath this steel washer, between the washer and the gear. So I'm just going to pull this gear out, and I'm just going to set it right there. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pull this plastic piece off. It just slides onto the post, so it's just a matter of prying it up gently. So everything's apart except for the drag washers. Let's go ahead and do that. So if I pull this washer up, nothing underneath, it's just metal. I'm going to put it over here, and then I'm going to start peeling the drag washers out. I'm going to put that one there. Now I got another metal one. This next metal washer has little wings on it. If you notice, there's little inserts on this gear where the wings go. So again, these all go in order. This gear will come off of the post, so I'm just going to go ahead and slide that off. It'll make it a little easier to get to the drag washers. There's another small washer right here on the bottom of this post. One thing I forgot, this is a sneaky little dude. There's a little small brass washer on the bottom of this post. I'm going to pull it off and I'm going to lay it right there. Don't forget it. So I'm going to scrub these parts up real good. Again, this reel's locking up on my friend, and we don't want that to happen, so I'm just going to clean this thing to death, and hopefully it will fix the problem. So I'm going to take a pipe cleaner, dip it in my fluid, run it through the gear, make sure the inside's good and clean. And then I'm just going to wipe everything down really good with a paper towel. I'm going to go ahead and put the drag stack back together. I'm going to use Cal's Universal Star Drag grease, and I'm just going to put a thin layer of grease on everything, including the post, all the gears, the drag washers, everything. One thing you got to remember about grease, if you put it on real thick, it's going to squirt out of whatever you put it on. So you're only going to get so much grease between two surfaces. If I put a big glob of grease here and I smash it, it's going to squirt out of the edges. So a thin layer is really all you need here. There's that little small brass washer we talked about earlier. Smear some grease on that. I'm gonna get my brush and put a thin layer on everything right here. Here's a little something I want to mention right here. This little rim right here, I'm gonna clean that off a little bit because that's where the brakes ride that slow the reel down when you're doing your brake adjustment. So a lot of heavy grease here is going to create a lot more drag on the spool when you go to cast. So that's one area where you don't want a lot of anything. If I'm going to put anything there, it's going to be oil, not grease. Here's another thing to remember. Grease slows everything down, oil speeds everything up. All right, so that's done. I'm going to put the little small brass washer back on there. One thing I wanted to point about this little mechanism here, there is a small spring and a plunger right here. I don't know if you can see it. But I like to load that up with some oil. We're just going to press this back into place. Before I put the gear back on this shaft, I'm going to put a couple of drops of oil right here. So that part right there is done. I'm going to try to get some of the factory grease out of the edge of this shaft here. Inside this tube is the anti-reverse bearing. You need to be a little careful with that, because if you mess it up, you're going to need a new side plate. The only way to get those things in and out is to press them, and you got to have a special tool. So another thing about the anti-reverse bearing is it's a roller bearing. It's not a ball bearing. If you put too much grease on it, it will start to float and it will fail when it comes to the anti-reverse mechanism. So it's designed to run on less grease, not more. So I'm going to put a little grease on the anti-reverse bearing, but I'm going to put it in the direction that the handle would go. So if the handle was on the reel, it's going to turn this way. These roller bearings are designed to roll when you're going this way and lock up when you're going that way. So when I put the grease in, I want to put it in the direction that the bearings are going to roll. So I'm going to roll the toothbrush in the direction that the handle would move. And that's going to about do it. So we're ready to put this thing back together, but before we do, I'd like to really reach out to all the viewers. I hope you've enjoyed the video. I hope you've got something out of it, and I'd really like to encourage you to support the channel. Please subscribe, like, and comment. It should snap and unlock. It should snap and unlock. It should snap and unlock, okay? Before I put the screws in, I kind of make sure that all that's working correctly. Seems to be working fine. First washer goes in cup side up, kind of like a bowl. Next washer goes in cup side down, like an upside down bowl. Once that nut gets snug, this cap, when you put it on there, you can see that it went too far, but I don't want to over tighten it, so I'm actually gonna twist it backwards. I'll do that again. When you snug this up, as soon as it gets snug, it looks like it went a little too far, because when I put the cap on there, it doesn't want to align. It's a little bit too far. If I put it over here, it's not far enough. I don't want it too tight, so I'm going to put it right there and just back it off a little bit with the cap itself. And then that's exactly the torque that nut needs to be. I'm going to put a little drop of oil on the end of that screw. Nice and smooth. Put the cap back on. Here's that rim that I was talking about earlier. I'm going to put a drop of oil there, and I'm going to take a Q-tip and smear that around. The brake bar is right against that rim, and I don't want grease on that. It'll slow the spool down big time. The axle's going to pop into place. You'll hear it snap into this spool cap. And what I'm going to do is, before I put this thing back together, I'm going to back off on that spool cap and it'll pull the axle back. Before you put the spool back on, make sure all the brake pads are in towards the center of the spool, or it will not go back into place. Once I get the thumb screws tight with my fingers, I'll usually turn another quarter of a turn with a screwdriver. Again, don't over tighten these. So that's it. The thing feels really good. It's nice and smooth, ready to go fishing.